I am living with my family. It's me, a 15-year-old girl, my twin brothers who are 17, and my parents. My dad cusses a lot, and so do my older brothers. But apparently the standards are different for me. My dad overheard me saying a couple cuss words when I was on the phone with my friends, and he got mad at me for my language. And for how trashy and unladylike it was. This wasn't the first time he called me, and only me, out for bad language. But it was the one that frustrated me the most because I could tell there was a double standard. I thought of calling him out on his language and hypocrisy, but then I had a different idea. I said that, yeah, it was a bad habit I was forming and didn't want to make a pattern, because if I got in the habit of cussing a lot, that wouldn't make me come off well when I start getting jobs or going to college. And as I was growing up, I wanted to learn how to speak respectfully and intelligently. But it was hard to keep from bad habits when I heard him and my brothers having potty mouth syndrome so often. They're setting an example whether they realize it or not. So I wanted to work on things for myself, but also together as a family. I suggested we make a swear tax where if anyone swears in front of anyone else who's participating, they give $1 to each person who heard them. I'd want that rule for myself because it would keep me accountable, and I'd really like it if the family joined me for it. So my dad said he'd join, and so would my mom. They got my brothers to be a part of it too. They didn't really have a choice. My parents decided to make it a rule. I know it's kinda petty, but I wanted to make the point that my dad and brothers swear a lot and I almost never do. In the few months we've had the rule, I've gotten about $250 from hearing my dad and brothers cuss. And have not sworn once. It's kinda making my brothers angry because they often cuss when they're mad, and I ask them for money, so they get madder and cuss more. So I get more money until they shut up. My dad actually got mad at me too. He was having some drinks, calling his brother and talking. And I came over after and asked for $18. He actually said he wouldn't give me that much, and there should be a cutoff. He gave me $5, which sends a weird message. Like swearing is bad, unless you want to swear a lot, then it's cool. I did it because I know I swear the least out of my family, but I was the only one getting in trouble for it. I bought a house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear now, apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady, largely because street parking is extremely limited, and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is, unless you have a driveway, you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away, and that's the best case scenario. I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight, and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking, an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car, and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out. I moved in and no, it is not fine, and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work, and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance, and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago, and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom, she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all. So I am 22 years old. I don't have much knowledge about finances and stuff as I still live at home as I'm at university. I do, however, pay my parents about £300 a month rent. I pay my own phone plan, buy material stuff I want or need, pay out for other services like for music or whatever, and try to put as much as I can in savings whilst still keeping enough in my main account for day-to-day purchases. Currently, I am saving up for driving lessons and hope that if I pass decently, I can use some of my savings towards getting a car. I'm in my final year of uni, so I'll be done and able to work full-time when all this happens. I also decided to get a credit card so I can learn how to manage credit wisely and build some up. My credit score is good for someone of my age and circumstance, but obviously it's nothing great in comparison for other stuff. I should point out that at most I only plan on using this card with a total adding up to £100. I've stuck to that so far and only actually used it twice, with these purchases only adding up to £80, and I paid it off quickly. I do not plan on exceeding my limit anytime soon, as I've heard far too many horror stories of people just using their credit card too much cause it was handy and getting into debt. The only people I disclose this to is my dad, as my mom has the tendency to blab to my brother and sister-in-law, both 28. She happened to overhear us talking one day, and before I knew it, my brother and sister-in-law got wind and asked me if they could use it. They both admitted they had debt spurred on by excessive credit card use and thought that since I basically had nothing owed on mine, it was free money. I told them quite politely that I was really uncomfortable with that idea and that I would owe the money and I can't magic up that kind of money. Things went quiet until a few days later they both turned up at the house. They were nice to start with, but basically started demanding I let them use the card, and they tried to manipulate my mother into guilting me into doing it. I got really angry, and when my brother said I owe it to them because they used to babysit me up until a couple of years ago, I laughed in their faces and walked out. When I came home, I learned they tried to manipulate my dad and he kicked them both out. My mother then tried and he told her to go too, and she is currently staying with my brother and Sil. The only person on my side is my dad, who tells me they're all trying to take me for a ride and they're trying to manipulate me cause I'm young and they think I'm vulnerable. My brother, sister-in-law and mom on the other hand think it isn't a big deal letting someone else use my card. It's really messing with my head, and I just want everyone to stop being in an argument. I'm a professional ballet dancer for a living, but I also do some modeling in my spare time. Last weekend, I was doing a latex shoot. Before anybody says anything, it wasn't anything fetish-wise. It was just a shoot that called for wearing more uncommon types of fabrics. My outfit was a black full-body catsuit, so think of a skin-tight garment that covers from neck to toe, including gloves. If you've ever put on a wetsuit, then you can probably imagine how much of a pain it is. It's a pretty in-depth process that involves lots of baby powder, a lot of sweat, and some less than ladylike stances. Dressing usually takes anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes start to finish. I always dread it, but can't argue with the results. Anyway, my boyfriend was in my dressing room as I was getting changed. He doesn't always come along for shoots, but I needed him that day because my car is being repaired and we needed to go somewhere afterwards. His one kinda annoying thing is that he talks to me while I'm getting changed, even though I very politely asked him to let me do it in peace. If I'm just putting on a dress or something less complicated, it's not a problem. But with latex, you have to concentrate, seriously. My facial expression is pretty similar to when I'm doing heavy leg presses or squats at the gym, so that the garment slips on correctly and, more importantly, you don't rip it. It's very easy to tear if you're not careful. And a full-body catsuit can cost upwards of $700 to $800 minimum. So as I'm struggling, may have been on the floor on my back with my feet up on a chair, pushing my butt up to get the garment over my hips, he won't stop talking. Come on, girl, you got this. Do you want help? I don't think you put on enough baby powder. Babe, you got this, get that big ass in there. And I politely asked him several times to just let me concentrate. He responds by saying, "Relax, I'm just trying to help," before patting me on the butt. I'd had enough. I demanded he stand outside because he was being super distracting and I couldn't afford to rip the garment. I didn't ask him to help because there's a technique to getting latex on and he doesn't have it. He got all pissy and was like, "Whatever, maybe you need a bigger size anyway," before leaving the shoot completely and taking the car. I had to get an Uber home after the shoot. On one hand, I was getting super frustrated, I was hot and sweaty, and combined with my kinda short temper, I was getting pissed off that I couldn't get the suit on. On the other hand, I asked him multiple times not to comment or distract me. And I never indicated that I was in the mood to be touched.